You are back to the international news program. Speaking of the Russia-China friendship, Washington has said in recent weeks that it is concerned that Beijing might arm Moscow. Meanwhile, the president of Ukraine warned that such a scenario could lead to a third world war. So according to experts, will this scenario happen? Please watch the program to find out. Despite these concerns, Beijing has denied it has plans to send arms to the Russians, and experts seem to think weaponry being sent is unlikely. Foreign policy analysts said while Putin would be looking for strong support from Mr. Xi over Ukraine, they doubted his Moscow visit this week would result in military backing. Yu Jia, senior research fellow at the Asia-Pacific program at Chatham House in London, said Mr. Xi's entourage does not include any senior members from the People's Liberation Army. This may send a clear message that Beijing is unlikely to offer any direct military support to Moscow despite what some pundits have asserted, she said. China appears to be more interested in acting as a mediator for peace initiatives with regard to Ukraine than increasing support for the Russian invasion, said Robert Murrett, deputy director of the Institute for Security Policy and Law at Syracuse University. Ukrainian Defense Ministry's main intelligence directorate has no evidence of China providing Russia with weapons, the directorate's spokesperson Andriy Yusov said on March 20. According to Yusov, as cited by the Ukrinform news outlet, Russia has bought commercially available Chinese-made drones or civilian products with microcircuits suitable for military use. However, interstate aid has not been confirmed. Yusov added that information on China's supply of rifles or body armor to Russia was being checked, but there is currently no evidence of such cooperation. Trade and customs data between June and December 2022 showed that Chinese companies had exported 1,000 assault rifles and other equipment, such as drone parts and body armor, to Russian entities, Politico reported on March 16. Yusov's statement comes amid Chinese President Xi Jinping's three-day visit to Russia, which the military official called a visit of a strong regional leader to a country that is undergoing geopolitical defeat. As a pragmatic geopolitical player, China will strengthen its position on Russia's territory, protecting its own economic and other national interests exclusively, Yusov said. Russia will become less and less a subject, more and more dependent on other players. Putin's regime will continue to weaken. Multiple U.S. officials have publicly stated over the past month that China was considering providing lethal aid to Russia. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told CNN on February 27 that there would be real costs for China if the country makes such a decision. Ukrainian military effectively use various Ram-2 attack drones to take down Russian equipment. This Type 2 enemy air defense systems came under fire. Russian Tor M2 systems were hit by the UAVs. The video published by Ukrainian volunteer Serhiy Prichula tells that first, air reconnaissance spotted one of the two Russian systems on March 15 in Zaporizhia operational direction, southern Ukraine. Then, while engaging this Russian air defense system, the Ukrainians detected another one as well and sent one more drone for a sortie. Worth noting, the estimated value of one Tor M2 is about $25 million. The Ram-2 kamikaze drones used for these attacks are a joint development of Ukrainian Ukrospec Systems and Deviro companies. The unmanned aerial system includes the Ram-2 loitering munition itself, the control station with terminal software and a PD-2 reconnaissance drone to watch over the Rams as they attack the target. Most likely, the footage we see in the video was shot by such a PD-2 drone loitering above. It should be noted, the author of the video, Serhiy Prichula, says these Ram-2 drones were the ones procured after a fundraising campaign initiated in October last year. Earlier, Defense Express also shared a video featuring an attack on another Russian Tor M2 and the valuable S-300 VM with the use of mysterious and highly effective kamikaze drones. According to the Eurasian Times, Tor M2 is an upgraded version of the Tor M1 short-range air defense missile system, designed by Russia's Almaz Defense Company. Introduced in 2007, the Tor M2 system is designed to counter fixed and rotary-wing aircraft, UAVs, guided missiles and other precision weapons. Tor M2 is known as the Thunder God of Russia. Over 10 crews of advanced Su-30SM and Su-30SM-2 fighter jets from a naval aviation regiment of the Baltic Fleet kicked off tactical flight drills with bombing and missile strikes in Russia's westernmost exclave of the Kaliningrad region, the fleet's press office reported on Monday. During the drills, the pilots are exercising to destroy enemy military hardware columns, sea-manned posts and amassed manpower, military-industrial facilities, adversary aircraft, airborne and amphibious assault forces, and also to provide fire support to units of the Baltic Fleet's Army Corps, the press office said in a statement. In the course of fulfilling their training objectives, the pilots are also sharpening the skills of conducting maneuvers in an aerial battle, carrying out reconnaissance and striking targets by bombs and airborne guns, it said. In all, the crews of the fighter aircraft will need to strike over 20 various targets, launch airborne rockets and drop bombs, the press office specified. About 10 aircraft and over 50 flight and ground personnel from a composite aviation regiment of the Baltic Fleet's naval aviation are participating in the drills, it said. As its major advantage compared to the Su-30SM, the upgraded Su-30SM-2 is outfitted with completely domestic equipment. The fighter features improved performance characteristics of its optoelectronic target acquisition navigation system, the electronic warfare system and the radar control system with an extended range of detecting air targets. In addition, the modernized Su-30SM-2 employs a larger arsenal of longer-range air-to-air and air-to-surface missiles to engage air and ground targets, including radar and naval targets. The first batch of upgraded Su-30SM-2 fighter jets arrived for the Baltic Fleet in early 2022. Su-30SM fighters are also operational in the Baltic Fleet's Composite Aviation Regiment. The Biden administration should press the accelerator pedal on negotiations with Russia on Ukraine, a U.S. expert said in an article for Responsible Statecraft on Monday. According to George Beebe, director of Grand Strategy at Washington-based Quincy Institute, there are three big factors showing why the United States should do that. They will shape prospects for the conflict in Ukraine, he believes. Each of these affects the others in potentially reinforcing ways. Together, they could soon create a dynamic that might greatly constrain the ability of the U.S. President Joe Biden administration to steer events toward its desired outcomes, Beebe emphasized. The first, to him, is the course of battlefield developments. Russian troops are getting closer to encircling Artyomovsk, known in Ukraine as Bakhmut, while Ukrainian forces look to be on the brink of their first significant setback since last summer, Beebe noted. This battle, he said, is exacting an enormous toll on Ukraine. The second factor is U.S. domestic policies, Beebe said. For months, American popular opinion on the Russian special military operation has been growing more polarized, with Republicans increasingly questioning U.S. war aims and the extent of American support for Ukraine, he maintained. Whereas Biden's Ukraine policy enjoyed overwhelming bipartisan support over the past year, it is likely to face mounting political opposition going forward, said the expert, who was director of the CIA's Russia analysis and a staff advisor on Russia matters to Vice President Richard Cheney. Beebe views China as the third factor that he says is starting to become active. Beijing's bid to play mediator could have appeal for Kyiv, he warned. By the summer, the expert underscored, Ukraine might well have less bargaining leverage as its battlefield position stagnates and its confidence in enduring American support erodes. Both Ukraine and Russia could, for different reasons, find China increasingly attractive as a potential mediator, even if neither is yet prepared for significant concessions, Beebe assumes. In his article, Beebe said it was not too late for the Biden administration to find a way out of this potential trap by pressing the accelerator pedal on negotiations with Russia. But it is not too soon to say that the window of opportunity for American diplomacy is in danger of narrowing, the expert concluded. U.S. President Joe Biden is interested in talking again with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, according to John Kirby, the National Security Council's Strategic Communications Coordinator. Xi is currently in Moscow on a 3-day visit hosted by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Nothing has been scheduled between the U.S. and Chinese leaders yet, Kirby said. U.S. officials want to make sure it's at the appropriate time, he added. It's important that we keep those lines of communication open, particularly now, when tensions are so high, he said. Biden met with Xi for 3 hours in November on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali. It was their first in-person encounter since Biden took office. At the time, the president told reporters he was open and candid with Xi about the range of matters where Beijing and Washington disagree. Kirby also said the U.S. wants to reschedule Secretary of State Blinken's visit to Beijing. It was postponed in February in response to the flying of a suspected Chinese spy balloon. Blinken intends to travel to China at the earliest opportunity when conditions allow, a State Department official said last month, though the official did not elaborate on what conditions the U.S. is watching for. Kirby also said the U.S. is having active discussions with China about Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo visiting the country. The United States and the Philippines will hold security talks involving their foreign and defense chiefs in Washington on April 11, a spokesman of the U.S. Embassy in Manila said Monday, the first such 2+2 talks in about 7 years. The resumption of the dialogue, the schedule of which was also confirmed by a ranking Philippine official, is the latest sign that Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s government is eager to enhance its alliance with the United States in the face of China's assertive behavior in the South China Sea. The 2+2 talks between the two countries did not take place under his predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte, who served for 6 years through June 2022 and was criticized for taking a soft stance with China. Also, from April 11, the United States and the Philippines will kick off their annual Balikatan military exercise, the largest by far, with a total of over 17,000 soldiers from the United States, the Philippines and first-time participant Australia joining, Philippine Defense Chief Carlito Galvez said at a ceremony for the rehabilitation of a Philippine Air Base runway in Floridablanca. The Philippines and the United States agreed to the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement in 2014, which is a supplement to the Visiting Forces Agreement between the two countries that allows the United States to build facilities and position assets in key Philippine military bases. Expected U.S. stopovers in coming weeks by Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen are standard practice and China should not use them as a pretext for aggressive action toward the democratically governed island, a senior U.S. administration official said. Tsai plans to transit through New York and Los Angeles as part of a trip to Central America, and sources have told Reuters that U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy intends to meet her during the California leg of her visit. China, which claims Taiwan as its territory, has said it is seriously concerned about Tsai's travel plans. But the senior U.S. official told reporters on a call on Monday night that every president of Taiwan had transited through the U.S., and that Tsai has done so herself 6 times since taking office 2016, most recently in 2019. She had met members of Congress during all of those visits, the official added, noting that the COVID-19 pandemic had limited her travel in more recent years. We see no reason for Beijing to turn this transit, again, which is consistent with long-standing U.S. policy, into anything but what it is. It should not be used as a pretext to step up any aggressive activity around the Taiwan Strait, the official said. The official said Washington had communicated to Beijing that Tsai's stopovers are in keeping with past precedent. There is nothing new from our point of view, the official said. Noting that President Joe Biden hoped to speak to Chinese leader Xi Jinping soon and that Secretary of State Antony Blinken would like to reschedule a postponed trip to Beijing, the official said, we urge the PRC, People's Republic of China, to keep these channels of communication open. In terms of contact with McCarthy's office, we offer briefings to members before engagements. We tend to do that before travel, before meetings. We've had some regular contact there, the official added. Tsai's anticipated U.S. meeting with McCarthy is seen as a potential alternative to a sensitive visit by the Republican Speaker to Taiwan, a trip he has said he hopes to make. China staged military exercises around Taiwan in August following a visit to Taipei by then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Taiwan is China's most sensitive territorial issue and a major bone of contention with Washington, which maintains only unofficial ties with Taipei, but is required by U.S. law to provide the island with the means to defend itself. China believes the United States is colluding with Taiwan to challenge Beijing and giving support to those who want the island to declare formal independence. Taiwan's government says the People's Republic of China has never ruled the island and so has no right to claim it, and that only its 23 million people can decide their future. Germany's Minister of Education and Research Bettina Stark-Watzinger visited Taiwan on Tuesday, March 21, the first time a German minister had done so in 26 years, to strengthen ties between the two countries. Stark-Watzinger said at a news conference at Taipei's National Science and Technology Council that cooperation with Taiwan will focus on semiconductors, hydrogen research and development, as well as bolstering the exchange of skilled labor between the two countries. The politically sensitive visit comes at a time when Berlin is reviewing its previously close ties with China. The German government that was elected in 2021 is developing a new China strategy to reduce dependence on Asia's economic superpower. However, Stark-Watzinger told reporters on Tuesday that the visit was purely a technical one, and does not represent Germany's diplomatic approach to China. China views democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory and has increased military, political, and economic pressure to assert those claims. Japan is quietly upgrading its submarine capabilities, adding some of the stealthiest boats in the world to its fleet to maintain a competitive edge over China. On Monday, Japan's Ministry of Defense received its newest submarine, the Hakugi, from Kawasaki Heavy Industries. It is the second ship of the new Taigi-class diesel-electric submarines and is equipped with lithium-ion batteries that enable longer underwater operations. The diesel-electric submarine works like a hybrid vehicle, charging the battery system while it runs on the diesel engine and switching to battery power once deep underwater and in operation mode. When running on batteries, the engine is virtually silent, unlike nuclear-powered submarines, which cannot turn off their reactors. This stealth, combined with Japan's tradition of underwater noise analysis, IFIC Ocean, gives Japan an advantage over Chinese submarines. U.S. analysts have called for Japan's submarines to defend choke points in a potential Taiwan crisis, ambushing Chinese submarines in the East China Sea and Sea of Japan as they seek to break out into the pack. Restricting Chinese vessels' freedom to maneuver is said to be one of the key ways Japan could assist the U.S. military in a regional contingency. Japan is the only country known to have fitted lithium-ion batteries to submarines. Currently, for Japanese submarines, the two Taigi-class ones and the two last Soryu-class submersibles have lithium-ion batteries in their engine rooms. Kyoto-based battery provider GS Yuasa says lithium-ion batteries recharge faster than lead-acid batteries, have increased battery discharge rates and higher energy density, all of which contribute to more stealth and longer times underwater. The Hakugi is fitted with high-strength steel for its pressure hull to enable the boat to operate in deeper waters. The total production cost was around 72 billion yen, $550 million. As one of the country's 22 submarines, the Hakugi, which means white whale in Japanese, will join the Maritime Self-Defense Forces Kure Naval Base in Hiroshima Prefecture. It replaces the Oyashio, the lead boat of the Oyashio class, which was decommissioned earlier this month after 25 years of service. Two Russian Tupolev Tu-95 MS strategic missile-carrying bombers conducted a scheduled aerial patrol over the neutral waters of the Sea of Japan, Russia's defense ministry reported on Tuesday. Two Tu-95 MS strategic missile-carrying bombers of long-range aviation performed a scheduled flight in the airspace over the neutral waters of the Sea of Japan. The flight lasted over 7 hours, the ministry said. Su-30SM and Su-35S aircraft from the Eastern Military District's Air Force and Air Defense Army provided fighter support for the Russian strategic bombers, the ministry said. The crews of Russia's long-range aircraft regularly perform flights over the neutral waters of the Arctic, the Northern Atlantic, the Black and Baltic Seas and the Pacific Ocean, it added. The aircraft of Russia's aerospace forces perform all the flights in strict compliance with the international rules of using the airspace, the defense ministry stressed. Hungary's top diplomat Peter Szijjártó has assured his Finnish counterpart Pekka Haavisto that his country's parliament will approve the Nordic country's accession to NATO in a vote on March 27. Today, I assured Finnish Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto that the National Assembly will vote next Monday to ratify Finland's accession to NATO, Szijjártó wrote on his Facebook page, owned by the US-based corporation Meta, outlawed as an extremist organization in Russia, following a meeting of the EU foreign ministers in Brussels on Monday. The Hungarian foreign minister did not mention Sweden, which applied to join the North Atlantic Alliance at the same time with Finland. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg welcomed Finnish Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto and Defense Minister Antti Kaikkonen to NATO headquarters on Monday, March 20, 2023, for talks on Finland's progress toward membership in the alliance. Mr. Stoltenberg welcomed the announcement by Turkey that they will now move forward on the ratification of Finnish membership, and Hungary's announcement that they will also vote on Finnish ratification in the coming days. We welcome the progress which is now made on finalizing the ratification of Finland, and we will continue to work hard. It will be a top priority to ensure that also Sweden will become a full member in the near future, he said. The Secretary General added, President Putin invaded Ukraine with the declared goal of having less NATO in Europe. He is getting exactly the opposite. There will be more NATO in Europe. In recent years, the Arctic has once again risen to one of the top priorities for the US and NATO. Greenland's government has for the first time agreed to send a Greenlandic diplomat to NATO to represent the remote part of the Danish realm. Greenland's government, Naalakkersuisut, and the Danish Foreign Ministry have for the first time agreed to send a Greenlandic diplomat to NATO to represent the remote part of the Danish realm. It is important that Greenland increases its insight into the security policy development in the High North and NATO's focus on the region, Greenland's Department for Foreign Affairs, Business and Trade said in a statement. It is also important that NATO increases its understanding of the special conditions of our region and our society, and familiarizes itself with our interests, our values and priorities, Greenlandic Minister for Foreign Affairs, Business and Trade Vivian Motzfeldt said. Lida Skift-Lennart, who has 25 years of experience in Greenland's central administration behind her, will become the island nation's first permanent representative at the US-led alliance's headquarters in Brussels. Greenland, the remotest part of the Danish realm, has recently become a key area of US and NATO interest amid the military buildup in the far north. In 2019, former US President Donald Trump notoriously shocked Denmark with a surprise offer to buy Greenland, but received a cold shoulder from Copenhagen. In recent years, the Arctic has returned to the top of the US security and defense agenda. Already in the Pentagon's 2019 Arctic strategy, the region was designated as a potential corridor for strategic competition, particularly with Russia and China's massive military investments. A UN climate official called for greater political will for more action after a new assessment from scientists said there was little time to lose in tackling climate change. Simon Steele, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, said there was still an opportunity to act after the publication of a report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. It tells us that we're running out of time, but we're not running out of options, and there is an opportunity at COP28 later this year to land some strong decisions, Steele said, adding that it was clear what needed to be done, when and by whom. Steele was attending a ministerial meeting in Copenhagen headed by the presidents of COP27 and COP28 to assess action and progress on climate commitments when the report was published. What's still lacking is the political will to engage and the political will to implement those prescriptions, he said. The IPCC's synthesis report summarized findings from 3 expert assessments published between 2021 and 2022 that looked at the physical science, impacts, and mitigation of climate change. The summary report is designed to provide clarity for policymakers as they consider further action to slash emissions. The 37-page report was distilled from thousands of pages of previous assessments after a week of deliberations in Interlaken, Switzerland. The document will also serve as a guide for a global climate change stocktake set to take place this year, in which countries will assess progress. Under the 2015 Paris Agreement, nations are also expected to update climate pledges by 2025. According to the IPCC, emissions must be halved by the mid-2030s if the world is to have any chance of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 Fahrenheit, above pre-industrial levels, a key target enshrined in the Paris Accord. The United States has determined that members of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, ENDF, Eritrean Defense Forces, Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, forces and Amhara forces committed war crimes during the conflict in northern Ethiopia, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Monday, March 20. Members of the ENDF, Eritrean forces, and Amhara forces also committed crimes against humanity, Blinken told reporters, including murder, rape and other forms of sexual violence and persecution. Members of the Amhara forces committed the crime against humanity of deportation or forcible transfer and committed ethnic cleansing through their treatment of Tigrayans in the western Tigray, Blinken said. The determination comes after the top U.S. diplomat trip to Ethiopia last week, where he praised progress in implementing a peace deal in the country but stopped short of readmitting it to a U.S. trade program. The Ethiopian government and forces from Tigray signed a ceasefire in November, ending a conflict that killed tens of thousands of people, left hundreds of thousands facing hunger and displaced millions. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said on Tuesday he would restore Japan's fast-track trade status after a summit with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida last week, a move he called crucial for bolstering supply chains in key areas. Yoon announced the decision at a cabinet meeting, saying South Korea and Japan should make efforts to remove obstacles that hinder developing bilateral ties. I will preemptively order our trade minister today to begin necessary legal procedures to have Japan back on our white list, Yoon told the meeting, which was televised live. I'm sure Japan will respond if South Korea first starts removing the obstacles. South Korea and Japan removed each other from the list in 2019 amid a decades-old row over a 2018 South Korean court order for Japanese companies to compensate forced laborers during Japan's 1910-45 occupation of Korea. Tokyo criticized the ruling, saying the issue was resolved under a 1965 treaty that normalized relations, and the strained ties fanned concerns over U.S.-led efforts to bolster cooperation to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Yoon, who took office in May, has vowed to mend the bilateral ties and visited Tokyo last week for the first time in 12 years as a South Korean leader. Yoon is pushing to resolve the forced labor feud through a plan unveiled this month under which a public foundation, funded by South Korean companies, would pay compensation. The plan was welcomed in Tokyo but faced a backlash from some victims and South Korean opposition lawmakers, who accused Yoon of capitulating to Tokyo and inviting Japanese troops back to the Korean peninsula. Sri Lanka will get the first $330 million tranche of an International Monetary Fund bailout in the next 2 days, the global lenders said on Tuesday, putting the onus on the cash-strapped country to rein in its debt to sustainable levels. Economic mismanagement coupled with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic left Sri Lanka severely short of dollars for essential imports at the beginning of last year, tipping the island nation into its worst financial crisis in 7 decades. The IMF's executive board on Monday approved a nearly $3 billion bailout with the endorsement expected to catalyze additional support to the tune of $3.75 billion from the likes of the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank and other lenders. This was the 17th IMF bailout for Sri Lanka and the third since its decades-long civil war ended in 2009. The office of President Ranil Wickremesinghe said the program would enable it to access up to $7 billion in overall funding. Sri Lanka is no longer deemed bankrupt by the world, Wickremesinghe said in a video statement. The loan facility serves as an assurance from the international community that Sri Lanka has the capacity to restructure its debt and resume normal transactions. Getting financial assurance from China, its largest bilateral creditor, was the last remaining hurdle for Sri Lanka in securing the IMF bailout. Once China confirmed its backing this month, the IMF went ahead with the deal. Sri Lanka, which also needed support from other major lenders like India and Japan, thanked the international community, including the United States, for talking to the Chinese government to back its debt restructuring plan. Russia expects more diversified cooperation with China as the bilateral, no-limits partnership between the two countries is gaining momentum, according to Andrei Kostin, head of Russia's VTB Bank. In an interview with China Global Television Network, CGTN, Kostin said that since Western sanctions had restricted Russia's foreign exchange activities, his bank was looking at other currencies to replace lost dollar and euro forex business. Of course, we should change a lot of strategies. We are already Russia's #1 bank in Western markets. Currently, as we cannot continue to operate in dollars and euros, we are focusing on the ruble and other currencies, such as the yuan. We are the first bank to actually introduce the idea and program for payment and settlement in the national currency, including the renminbi, and we are the only Russian bank with a full license in China. So we are working very hard on this, and I think there is a good chance, he told Chinese media. On March 20th, Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in Moscow for a 3-day state visit to Russia, at the invitation of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Speaking ahead of Xi's visit, Kostin, as a member of the Russian delegation, said the visit sends a strong political signal and is expected to produce good results. Politics is all about signs and symbols. It's very symbolic that after quite a solid re-electionto become a leader, or re-election for the government leader of China, President Xi is paying his first international trip to Russia. That reflects the unlimited partnership of the two countries, the head of VTB Bank added. Kostin also set a target of Russia and China reaching an annual trade turnover of $500 billion. This is a very ambitious goal as bilateral trade has reached around $190 billion by 2022, after increasing by 34.3% year-on-year. A Singapore shoe recycling project will be subject to surprise inspections following a Reuters investigation that found footwear it donated to the scheme was not recycled, Singapore's Minister of Culture said on Monday. U.S. petrochemicals giant Dow Inc., Dow. And Sport Singapore, a government agency, had pledged that the shoes would be ground down to make playgrounds and running tracks. The investigation, using location trackers hidden inside the soles of shoes, found sneakers donated by Reuters in Singapore had instead been exported to Indonesia for resale. That also contravened a 2015 ban by Indonesia on such practices, which was put in place for hygiene purposes and to protect its local textile industry. Presented with Reuters' findings, Dow and Sport Singapore opened an investigation and later terminated the contract of Yak Impex, a local textile exporter that was subcontracted to collect shoes from donation bins. They issued a statement after the publication of the February 25 story apologizing to the public for a lapse in its recycling supply chain. What resulted, as far as we can tell, from the investigation, came from a lax system, Minister for Culture, Community and Youth Edwin Tong said, responding to questions in Parliament. He added that in addition to unannounced inspections for contractors hired to collect the shoes, companies that export textiles or footwear will not be employed again. Indonesia also said this month it would tighten customs checks at small ports to crack down on the illegal import of second-hand shoes. As a result of Reuters' findings, thousands visited Mexico's Teotihuacan ruins on Monday, March 20, to welcome the spring equinox, which is the first day of the solar new year. Foreign and local pilgrims, many dressed in white, climbed the towering pyramid of the sun to mark the occasion and to bask in the first sunlight of the solar new year. Coming here and getting to know a bit of history of our world is really impressive, and I think it filled me with joy, said a Colombian student, Durley Vazquez. Every year, people visit Mexico State's Teotihuacan ruins, about 30 miles, 50 kilometers, north of Mexico City, to climb the Pyramid of the Sun and to raise their arms towards the sky as the sun hits. Many believe they receive special energy from the equinox sun and the pyramids. Twice a year, on March 20th or 21, and September 22nd or 23, the sun shines directly on the equator and the length of day and night are almost equal. The spring or vernal equinox is the halfway point between winter and summer. The Pyramid of the Sun is the third largest pyramid in the world and has served as a gathering place for meteorological events since it was built around 2,000 years ago.